Good afternoon. Is it on? I hope you can hear me well with your headsets. Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roberto Rinaldi. I am a policy officer of the Committee of the Regions, and I would like to welcome you all for this session. And I would also like to welcome you who are watching from home. And just a few messages before we get into the event. First of all, we would like to remind you that this is an event co-organized by the Committee of the Regions, by the Scottish Government, and with the support of the Edinburgh Process Partners. And I also would like to remind you that this event is taking place in English only, and we apologize for not being able to provide translation for this time. And then one final remark, COVID is still there. So please, I remind you everyone of the COVID-19 restrictions in place in the COP26 venue. I'm sure that who's watching home doesn't have to apply them. And then just wanted to say that to stay on your own seat, to wear a face mask at all time and stay socially distant, whatever possible, and use the hand gel. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll pass the floor to Sue Campbell from the Scottish Government. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto, and hello everyone here and everyone at home. The Edinburgh process is a global partnership led by the Scottish Government in agreement with the CBD, and we're galvanising the subnational constituency to represent their views and ensure inclusion of the constituency within the new framework that will be agreed in Kunming next spring at COP15. Building on the previous work of subnational networks, organisations and governments within the CBD since 2010 at COP10, the Edinburgh process is looking to parties to elevate their recognition of the subnational constituency, recognising that city and local and regional governments and authorities translate global goals and targets into action on the ground. And that's where transformative changes happen for biodiversity and for climate. And that's why parties need to include this level of government in planning, implementing, monitoring and reporting phases over the coming decades. The Edinburgh Declaration is key in that regard. And we're calling upon regional, city and local authorities to commit to take an action for biodiversity and climate. And I'm pleased to say that we're going to add to the number of signees of the declaration today. And that's really, really fantastic and great for the Edinburgh process. It's really important to link biodiversity and climate change. They're intertwined global challenges that must be tackled together. Climate is changing and it's harming nature. We rely on nature to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. Ecosystem restoration is hugely important, and that nature-based solutions play a key role. Local and regional implementation of nature-based solutions is hugely important, and it can address the twin crises at the same time. We need to act at global level, and it's so important for the UN CBD and the UNFCCC to recognise subnational and local governments. And that's why we're here today, to talk about that very subject. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, who's Harriet Bulkley, Professor at University of Durham. Thank you, Harriet.
Thank you very much, Sue, and it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you today. So yes, I'm a professor of geography at Durham University, and I was lucky enough to start working on cities' response to climate change in around about 1997, which is giving something away of my age, but having seen how this agenda has developed over this period and how important the agenda of working on biodiversity has become also for cities and subnational governments, it's key now to start thinking about those agendas together, and that's what we're here to do in this session. And so, yes, here also with the British Academy. So I would like to thank them for allowing me to be here. And today with the British Academy, we've launched a new platform which documents 100 projects happening around the world in regions and in cities with nature-based solutions. So please do check that out. But for the rest of the session, I'm really delighted to be on the platform with so many wonderful people and all of the action and the work that you're taking to progress this agenda. at multiple levels of governance. And we are here, of course, in the multi-level action pavilion. And I think we've really got a multi-level panel with us. So I'm very delighted to welcome the Scottish Minister for the Environment and Land Reform. Thank you very much for being with us, Ms. McCallan. We look forward to you starting us off in a minute. And Joyita, Mathieu Philippe from the CBD, thank you very much for joining us as well. And we'll hear from both of our keynote speakers first. And then I'll turn to the rest of the panel for their reflections on some of the things that they've heard, and also to hear what action that you're taking, representatives from the state of Jalisco, Quebec and Wales, and they will tell us what action they're taking on the ground. And then we will then move on to being joined by several members of our audience here who are all taking action with biodiversity and climate change on the ground. And we've got two key questions we're going to be addressing. We're going to be asking ourselves, what do subnational governments bring to the process for the CBD? And what can we learn from that for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change? So we've got a packed agenda. I'm going to have to be very strict with time. I've got my stopwatch here. Without further ado, I think we better get started. So please, Ms. McCallan.
Thank you. Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I am absolutely delighted to welcome you all today to Glasgow at this vital summit and at this most critical time for the twin crises of climate change and nature loss. And of course, to our Edinburgh Process Partners event. We're very proud that Scotland was one of the first countries to declare a global climate emergency and to recognise the inherent links between that climate emergency and the loss of biodiversity. Now, we have reached a critical juncture for action between this COP26 negotiations and the COP15 in Kunming. Sub-state levels of government play a key role in delivering action to address these dual crises. In Scotland, we have set world-leading climate change targets, and we're very fortunate to be chairing the European section of the Under2 Coalition. We've also adopted a leadership role on biodiversity, leading the engagement of subnational and local government as part of the important CBD process to develop the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, which we expect to be agreed at COP in spring. Whilst it is the role of parties to the convention to formally agree the global framework, all levels of government, in particular where responsibilities are devolved, as is the case with Scotland, we all have a part to play to deliver transformative actions for nature in the coming decade. And that's why I believe the Edinburgh process is so important, to ensure that the voices and views of the subnational constituency are heard and crucially acted upon. Through that process, we have established a new international agreement, the reason that we're all here today, the Edinburgh Declaration, which sets out the aims, aspirations, and expectations of sub-state and local authorities. It celebrates the progress that has already been made at this critical level of governance and sets out our strong desire to build upon previous CBD decisions, endorsing the inclusion of the subnational constituency within the convention. Subnational, regions, and local authorities, including cities, they really are front and centre of translating global and national strategies into real and tangible actions that affect our communities every day. Often, the resources to put in place transformative change, be that money, people, infrastructure, these resources are directed at subnational levels. They may not always be properly recognised nor properly utilised. And I think that the current global pandemic and the darkness and anxiety of the last couple of years have really shone a light on how important nature is to the health and well-being of everyone and everything on this planet. We must work together at all levels of government and reach out to voluntary and private sectors to ensure that we can all have a green and fair recovery from COVID-19. And in Scotland, you may have heard over the past few days that we are also guided by just transition principles in our climate and nature ambitions, meaning that we will seek, as we move to tackle these crises, not to leave anyone behind. At the level of subnational and local authorities, we believe we can put in place singular actions that deliver against multiple outcomes and work across multilateral environmental agreements using tools such as nature-based solutions to bring positive outcomes for our planet, for our people, for their well-being, and for climate change. The Edinburgh Declaration is our call in this regard to take stronger actions and make bolder decisions across the coming decade. So I would urge you all to join the over 180 subnational governments, cities, and local authorities who have already signed up. Please join them. There will be, as was said, an opportunity to do so at the end of this meeting. It is absolutely critical that all levels of government are included across all the Rio Conventions and wider, so that we can realise the CBD vision of humanity living in harmony with nature. So on that note, I should like to conclude by thanking you all very much for joining us today. And I hope that if you haven't already, that you will consider signing the declaration. And on that note, I will hand the floor to Jyoti Mathur-Philip, Divisional Head of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I like the idea that you ended with living in harmony with nature by 2050, because that is our vision. And it is why we are in the process of developing a post-2020 global biodiversity framework. So Professor Bartley, Ministers McCallan, Graf, Charette, and James, dear delegates, dear participants, dear subnational and local authorities, thank you for inviting the Convention on Biological Diversity to be here today. It is Nature Day, and we have been in so many events today, the CBD Convention and our Secretariat. We are very surprised because a few years ago, nature was not even part of the climate discussion, but now it is. So it is really a pleasure to be here. And it is even more of a pleasure to be here today because of this groundbreaking event, the Edinburgh Declaration. It is so important, the Edinburgh process, the partners that will, all of you will make a difference in implementing the Paris Agreement, as well as the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, while it's being negotiated, which it is currently, as well as when it's adopted, because we need implementation to start on day one. And you guys are the ones who are going to do it. And the implementation, and we have to remember some statistics. By 2050, they say that 78% of world's humanity is going to be living in or around cities, which makes it even more important for subnational governments to plan cities. You know, how do you plan cities so that you don't destroy all the forests and nature and biodiversity around while growing, cities? How do you ensure that blue and green zones come into the city? How do you ensure that that we as people don't lose any connection to nature? I don't know if I will be alive in 2050, perhaps not, but we need to make sure that, you know, we have blue and green zones for our citizens, for our people, for all of humanity to be part of, to be able to take part in nature. And we are one species. 99% of this species on earth depend on us to make these decisions for them. So I think our duty of care is very important for all of us when we're making decisions here or at COP15. So our convention is very unique in that it mobilized the subnational governments and cities in 2007 in Curitiba, when the mayor started co-hosting a summit. And now we are going to have the 6th summit in Kunming. So we are very, very happy to invite you there. Please be part of the summit and we will help as much as possible. The city of Bonn followed in 2008, and it's also the headquarters of ICLEI and our longest standing partner in hosting these summits. The Nagoya city and the Aichi prefecture in 2010 saw the adoption of the 10-year plan of action for the engagement of the subnational government, cities, and other authorities. And 3 other convention decisions followed, which means that our engagement with you is getting stronger and stronger. And 2 years ago, the government of Scotland decided to take the lead and to propose a process to engage these levels of government into careful global consultation and also how to engage in the post-2020 process. And there has been engagement. The post-2020 process is not just the global biodiversity framework. It is a whole lot of other decisions on mainstreaming, on review mechanisms, on resource mobilization that will help implement the framework. And so, whereas everyone's just looking at the targets, the goals and targets, it is much more than that. And the Edinburgh process has a space in our mainstreaming decisions. They are very well embedded in there. So I'm confident that thanks to your strategic support, the final version of the Global Biodiversity Framework and all the decisions that go with it, adopted in Kunming, China's biodiversity capital, by the way, will be functioned to all levels of spatial government, just as proposed in your ecosystems approach. This will open doors for many examples of multi-level, multi-stakeholder cooperation and for integrated approaches to implement the Sustainable Development Goals also. So all I want to say in the end is, thank you very much for inviting us, for doing the work that you are doing. And as the Edinburgh Declaration says, your role extends beyond the provision of just providing enabling conditions for the Rio Conventions. You are, and I quote, uniquely and most effectively positioned to deliver the outreach, awareness, and uptake of the framework across the whole of society, facilitating engagement with key stakeholders to implement the framework at subnational, city, and local levels. You can align biodiversity strategies and actions, increase resource mobilization for investment in biodiversity. So congratulations again, and thank you for the Edinburgh Declaration. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for such inspirational start to our discussion today, really setting out the scene of what's happened so far and why it's so important that we're working together. We have Johnny Hughes here from UNFCCC who's going to have the unenviable job of closing for us and summarizing everything that we've heard. So Johnny, I hope you're keeping good notes, a long-standing supporter of the Edinburgh Declaration. And now we're going to go and hear from 3 people who have been instrumental in getting the Edinburgh Declaration process actually being implemented on the ground. And I thank you all for your commitment and for joining us here today. And we're going to start with Sergio Graf, who's Minister for Environmental Affairs in the state of Jalisco in Mexico. Thank you, Sergio, for being here. Please, 3 minutes. I'm going to have to be getting strict now.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. Thank you very much. First, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone here and the invitation to participate and share with the states with a leadership in conservation biodiversity, local governments in the world. Thank you very much. I believe that the Edinburgh Declaration had given us a golden opportunity to elevate our ambition for the post-2020 biodiversity framework, and more importantly, for the involvement of the subnational governments in the global agenda. Nevertheless, this brings an enormous responsibility to us. We must enhance our policy and look for innovative alternatives for fighting against pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss. At the same time, we diminish poverty and vulnerability for local and indigenous communities. That is really, really important to share, to integrate this agenda in the future. We, as the nearly 200 signatories, have a real compromise. We are demanding a greater inclusion in the global framework of biodiversity. That builds upon a renew the plan of action endorsed under Decision 1022, and that significantly raised the ambition for subnational implementation of the new framework throughout the next decade. We believe that seeking solution at our level of government is essential to move forward. From the information document as part of the Advisory Committee on Subnational Governance to the CBD submitted the third meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation titled Mainstreaming Biodiversity, the Subnational Governance Experience. You can learn that subnational governance and innovation hubs and laboratories in which solutions to this challenge are tested, and that the benefits of many small subnational biodiversity measures accumulate at the global level. Together, the seemingly small efforts made by subnational governments to enhance biodiversity conservation and climate change mitigation can make a significant contribution. For example, in Mexico, we have a real issue of deforestation in all the country. In Jalisco, there are three main drivers of deforestation linked to the production systems. And that is very important to integrate biodiversity to the production agriculture systems. The avocado plantation, the agave plantation for tequila production and livestock for meat. And to address this problem, we have developed a state strategy of biodiversity integration in the productive sectors, like agriculture and livestock sector, fishing sector, and forestry sector. This frames a policy of productive change free for deforestation for the three main drivers. Derived from this policy, we got to work with each sector, with the Tequila Regulatory Council, the Livestock Producer Union, and the Avocado Producer and Exportation Association. And we, for the first case, and we advanced very high, very quick, we developed a verification protocol and certificate for deforestation-free tequila, achieving in a very short time the first certified brand of tequila with free deforestation brand. Also, we consider that connecting the climate and biodiversity sphere is especially crucial in this moment when the world is gearing of the stronger action on both convention. I want to take this opportunity to call on all subnational and regional leaders committee to making an impact for a sustainable future for everyone. The social approach on these two agendas is essential to guarantee a better future, reducing poverty and equality in all the planet. Regions 4 and the Advisory Committee on Subnational Governments gather leaders around the world that are making efforts to pursue the transformative change we all need. And this COP is a great opportunity to join forces.
Sergio,
Yeah.
sorry, I have to ask you.
Well, finally, in the face of growing environmental health and development challenge, we want to reassure the willingness of subnational and regional governments to play our part and stand ready to join the efforts of the parties in the implementation of post-2020 global biodiversity framework at the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So much interesting information to hear and so little time, but thank you so much. And Now, can I introduce Benoit Charette, Minister for the Environment and the Fight Against Climate Change in Quebec, which I like as part of your title. That's a great part of a title to have. I might change my name as a professor for the fight against climate change.
Bonjour tout le monde, un plaisir d'être avec vous, chers collègues, dear colleagues. In English is it takes me more time than in French. It's easier in French to read a text like that. Et maybe saluer aussi mon collègue Sylvain Gaudreau, député de l'Assemblée nationale. I have one of my colleagues here from the National Assembly. So when it comes to biodiversity and climate, the Quebec government is always ready to engage in discussion and take action, both in its territory and internationally. I should mention that Quebec comprises a vast territory of nearly 1.5 million square kilometers, an area more than 6 times the size of the United Kingdom. Our territory is home of tens of thousands of species of wild and domestic plants and animals, in addition to agricultural and horticultural plantings of all kinds. Quebec has been forging its own biodiversity conversation and climate change partnerships for more than 30 years. The Edinburgh Declaration is important for Quebec because of its active commitment in favor of the recognition of federated states, subnational governments, and local authorities in the implementation of actions to fight biodiversity loss. Together with the Regions 4, Quebec has been coordinating the advisory committee on subnational governments within the Convention on the Biological Diversity of for several years. I am also proud to underscore that the fact that Quebec has achieved its goal to protect its territory in accordance with the international objectives adopted as part of the Aichi targets. Quebec will continue to play its leadership role and help meet the next international targets for 2030. We believe that nature-based solutions contribute to both reducing greenhouse gas emission and improving the resilience of communities to such phenomena as flooding, coastal erosion, and extreme heat events. Nature-based solutions have been integrated into many of our policies that will guide us over the next decade, especially in carrying out our action aimed at reducing greenhouse gases and improving water quality and agricultural practices. Quebec financially supports partnerships, projects on ecological corridors to facilitate connecting natural environments and enable plans to adapt to climate change. It also provides financial support to municipalities and civil society organizations so they too can take action at their levels and with their partners. Quebec and other subnational governments and federated states, as well as local authorities, are taking major steps to protect biodiversity. I practiced this word earlier, but it doesn't it doesn't work. So to protect biodiversity in their territories and can contribute to the success of international climate action. And more than ever, international cooperation is the key to success. I am convinced that an initiative such as the Edinburgh Declaration can be developed and with respect to climate change. We must continue our efforts to forge ties between the Convention on Biological Diversity and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. For this to happen, concrete and concerted commitments are needed to meet today's challenges. Thank you. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you, Benoit. That was great. A tiny little bit of extra time was needed, so thank you so much. And now it is my very great pleasure also to introduce Julie James, who's Minister for Climate Change in Wales. Julie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes. Lots of kit. Wel, diolch yn fawr, prynawn da, rwy'n falch o siarad hi heddiw. Thank you very much. It's really great to be here this afternoon to speak with you all. The Welsh Government recognises the escalating nature of the nature emergency alongside the rest of the UK and the world, and we know that we have not yet made enough progress against global targets to reverse the decline in the biodiversity. Global biodiversity is still being lost at a frightening rate, with a rapid decline in very precious species and habitats. And talking to some of the indigenous nations present here at COP really brings that home to you. Wales too is experiencing the effects of this, with warmer temperatures, rising sea levels, changing rainfall patterns, and much more extreme weather events, which are now very familiar to us. We know that the climate and nature emergencies are absolutely and inextricably interlinked, as many people have said. The risks to the natural environment from climate change are increasing, but nature also has an important role in achieving net zero. We need to tackle both together if we're going to tackle them effectively. One cannot be done without the other, we think. We are very committed in Wales to progressive actions such as nature-based solutions, which be extremely effective means of addressing the dual challenge of climate change and biodiversity loss. So a prime example from Wales is our restoration of our peatland ecosystems. As the largest natural terrestrial carbon store, such action helps tackle both climate change and biodiversity loss. And we are absolutely determined to invest in the restoration of our precious natural habitats, both to sequester carbon, but also to increase, protect, and enhance our biodiversity. We've had frightening reports of the loss of biodiversity in the UK and across the world that we really must address. So to meet our climate change commitments, which we've put into our legislation, our Net Zero Wales plan sets out that by 2050, we must take bold action and cut 30% of our emissions in the next decade if we are to get to 2050. I too don't know if I'll be alive in 2050, but I very much hope that many generations will be still alive and there'll be a planet left for them to be part of. We know that we cannot do this alone. We know that climate change and global biodiversity cannot be halted without both international and local action. And that's why Wales is delighted to support and help realise the aims of the Edinburgh process, a process that recognises the crucial role of small nations, subnational governments, regions, cities and local authorities in delivering the global biodiversity framework to secure that net zero emissions by 2050. Put very simply, transformative international change for nature or climate will not come from a top-down approach alone. This is why in Wales, I've engaged myself with local authorities across Wales and encouraged them to be part of the Edinburgh process, a process to develop a more sustainable relationship with the natural world that begins in our local communities, supported by local governments and other public bodies. And why in Wales we've put in place a legal framework through our Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and our Environment Wales Act, which require public bodies in Wales to think about the long-term impact of their decisions and to work with their communities to tackle persistent problems like climate change and biodiversity loss. So in Wales, we are working very hard to make sure, I've just lost my place completely. That's one of the problems with using tech, isn't it?
Yes.
So in Wales, we're working very hard to make sure that the Edinburgh process is a bottom-up approach as well as a top-down approach. And the Edinburgh process enables that crucial work for small nations to be heard on an international stage, share lessons from best practice across the world, work proactively with one another and our international partners, because together, I really think we can do this. Diolch.
Thank you, Julie. That was fantastic. Great note, Brennan. Well, we have heard some really inspiring action that's taking place across the world. Thank you all very much for sharing your policies, your strategies, the things you're putting into place on the ground, and also your passion, as we have heard from all of you, how important this agenda is. And we now have a number of other colleagues who are going to help us address two questions that we have. Colleagues, we have approximately 19.5 minutes, and I have 6 of you, each of whom have 2 minutes to speak. So we are, I'm asking for your support and delivering your message as quickly as you can. We have the microphone, which is going to rove around so that we can have a bit of dynamic standing up and just engaging with us, because we're all part of this together, right? So I would, really, first of all, welcome Saida Rodriguez, Secretary of Urban Development and Environment, State of Yucatan, to share with us your experience and why this is important to you. You can, if you can stay there and just address us from where you are, we'll save time, but also then everybody feels they're part of it together. So thank you.
It's a great idea. hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Great.
okay.
Well, as a Yucatan state, we are committed, not only committed to the Edinburgh to the Edinburgh process is also very important for us, being part of a movement in Mexico of local governments who are trying to mix the biodiversity agenda with the climate change agenda. So it's a very big push for us to commit not only in this, but also into the commitment to have a better view of the importance of biodiversity.
Yeah.
And that's why as Yucatan, we have the voice of the portfolio of biodiversity and nature of ICLI in this year. And now we're trying to promote all of you, all people in here, trying to reach and to join into a very interesting platform and initiative is called Regions for Nature. And we believe that this could be a great tool for us local governments to have that view and have that impact that we all need in biodiversity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, stronger together and showing that strength together is really important. We're going to be joined online now. See behind me by Robbie Bower, who's reporter on biodiversity at the European Committee of the Regions and member of Edinburgh Municipal Council from Luxembourg. Robbie, welcome. We're sorry you're not with us directly, but welcome to the event.
Yeah, good afternoon, dear ministers and audience, and thank you for being invited to this webinar. What I would like to bring to the table is a need to have the subnational governments formally acknowledged for their contribution to the national and international targets and goals, knowing that the local and regional authorities are implementing concretely up to 70% of the climate, biodiversity and nature policies. In the preparatory process and in the first part of the CBD COP15 that took place last month, we already highlighted this need of recognition. I hope that the Edinburgh Declaration is a missing piece to complete the puzzle for a plan of action dedicated to subnational governments on the 2030 global biodiversity targets and goals. The European Committee of the Regions urges for this recognition to happen next year in Kunming on COP15. We will do so in cooperation with the Edinburgh process partners, with the other partners and members of the Advisory Committee for Subnational Governments and of the group of leading subnational governments on biodiversity. Most importantly, we will continue our bilateral discussions with our national delegations because they prove to be the best way to achieve our objectives, together with the possibility of taking the floor as major group during CBD sessions. I really hope that these ingredients will be the good ones for a successful recipe that recognizes formally the link between the biodiversity action at local level with the achievement of global targets and goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robbie. It's terrible when you hear yourself in your microphone when you're speaking. Sorry for that. Robbie, thank you so much for that. And I think we've heard from our two contributors there how much momentum is being developed through shared experience, through platforms, but also through this very sometimes quite difficult, quite grinding process of getting this recognition through the Biodiversity Convention process. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. But now the second question, can this actually be replicated for the Paris Agreement and the United Nations Framework Convention process? What can we learn from what's happened with the Edinburgh Declaration and taken to the Framework Convention for Climate Change? And to start us off on that, I'll ask Axel Grael, Mayor of Niterói in Brazil. Please, Axel, for your 2-minute thoughts.
Well, good afternoon. I would like to speak about on behalf of the city where I am the mayor, the city of Niterói, which is across the Guanabara Bay from the city of Rio de Janeiro, one of the most complex metropolitan areas in Brazil. And we have, I think it's easier without this.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm also the vice president of the Brazilian Mayors Association. So we are working to spread the word on the importance of local action on climate and biodiversity. And the city of Niterói was the second city, the only two cities that signed the Edinburgh Declaration was Niterói and São Paulo. We are also investing on sustainability, and we're really having sustainability, social justice, and climate as a way to recover the economy after COVID. My work as the vice president of the Brazilian Mayors Association is to take our experience to other local governments and share it, and motivate other cities to do the same thing as we are doing in Niterói. So I would like to congratulate all the cities, all the representations here about everything that is being done at the local level. We're trying hard to work in Brazil, even though there's a lot of controversy about the position of our country. There's a lot being done at the local level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your work, and thank you for sharing that with us today. And I'm now going to ask Anna Oregi, who's the member of ICLEI Europe's Regional Executive Committee and Deputy Mayor of Vitoria-Gasteiz. I'm sure I've gotten much of that wrong. Apologies, in Spain. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I came from Vitoria-Gasteiz. Vitoria-Gasteiz is the capital of the Basque Country and is the largest municipality there. We have 2,500 inhabitants, and the municipality consists of 3 concentric circles. The city itself at the head. The circle is surrounded by a large area of agricultural land, natural vegetation, some great infrastructures and industrial sites. And also we have 63 villages mainly located, and around it we can find the mountains, forests forming the third ring. Vitoria-Gasteiz is at the crossroad of the 2 biological climates, the Atlantic to the north and the Mediterranean to the south. A huge diversity of ecological environments coexist close to the city. Citizens have access to a range of natural habitats, from meadows and wetlands to beech forests and mountains. Since the 19th, we have been working in the defense, conservation, and recovery of biodiversity, collaborating in networks such as ICLEI, whom I would like to thank for their enormous work as a promoter and catalyst of action in cities, as well as cities with nature, with whom we are beginning to collaborate and who also provide us with first-class information and materials. I would like to underline the importance of the voice of cities and regions being heard of the international level, because we are the ones who implement the policies. We are the ones who localize the major decisions taken in these forums, and because we are the ones closest to the citizens. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. And I'm delighted also that we have another mayor with us today, Mayor Eric Simmons. And Roberto, Eric, thank you so much for being with us
Yes,
today.
thank you all so much for being here. I'm co-chair of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, and it's a group of mayors along the Mississippi River Basin. The Mississippi River Basin is unique in a way to lead climate performance insofar as the Mississippi River Basin produces 40% of the world's agricultural products. And also 1 out of 12 folks in the world consume products from the Mississippi River Basin. And so these mayors along the Mississippi River Basin, from the headwaters of Minnesota all the way down to the Gulf, have sustained over 210 billion in losses from disasters. And so what we've done is come together. We've got a natural base capacity study with 2 degrees adapt, Black and Vet, but also Cargill and other global partners to look at natural-based infrastructure. What we're going to do is look at 60,000 acres along the Mississippi River corridor, and that's going to sequester 480 1,000 tons of carbon by working with all of those mayors from 10 different states in the Mississippi River Valley. So that can be duplicated around the world, but also we just want to salute all of you all. As a point of current information, the bipartisan bill that was passed, these group of mayors also have a resilience revolving loan fund. And in this infrastructure package is $500 million that the president will sign to help with disaster resilience and making sure that we come back more resilient, we bounce back quicker for our folks, but also look at ecologically beneficial economic development projects as well. God bless and thank all of you all.
Thank you so much. That was very inspiring. And it's, you know, one of the things that I think, you know, we can't state enough, and colleagues from Brazil shared this already, that even when things are tough at other levels of government, there is always people out there taking the right kind of steps for nature, for people, and for climate change. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Really delighted now to welcome Suzanne Case, Chair of the Department of Land and Natural Resources of the state of Hawaii, and she is also the co-chair of the state's Climate Commission. Suzanne, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be with everyone here who's dedicated to the same level of implementation at the local level of these international goals that we have to have. Climate and biodiversity are inextricably intertwined. Hawaii is one of the highest biodiversity regions in the country because of our isolation, but also one of the highest threatened. Endangered species capital of the world, we are unfortunately also called. So the climate threats are the new threats that threaten this biodiversity. We have rain bombs, we have wildfires, they're killing our dryland forests and our coastal areas, our estuaries. We have coral bleaching that is killing our reefs. And we have mosquitoes that are now killing our forest birds because they're going higher up in the elevation with the warming temperatures. So all of these threats have to be mitigated both on the climate side and on the biodiversity side. And so we know that those are the answers that we have to implement. It's simple in concept, difficult to do on the ground. It's reforestation, it's planting trees, it's making sure you have fishery replenishment areas to allow the reefs to regrow after coral bleaching. All of these things are essential for resilience. And our Climate Commission is a microcosm. Islands are a microcosm of the planet. We can see it from all the way to the mountaintops, all the way to the ocean. We can see this and we have an intimate relationship with it. And so our Climate Commission is structured to take advantage of multiple levels of government. We have county, we have state agencies, we have legislators all working together so that we can implement these solutions on the ground. We know that it is time for action. It's time to get below net zero. It's time to move forward to make sure we can build a resilient planet.
Thank you, Suzanne. That is also very inspiring, and just that, you know, the level of the way in which people are bringing these agendas together on the ground. That's what we've also heard, that it's on the ground that we need to act on climate and on nature and with communities at the same time. And it just is very real when you're having to implement it. That's difficult to do, but crucial to make it work. So thank you for sharing that with us. And now I would like to invite Ana Banadas, who's the Secretary for Climate Action of Catalonia, she's an early adopter, I believe, in Catalonia of the declaration. Is she here with us? Maybe she hasn't made it. She hasn't quite made it. Okay. Well, as she has already signed, then she's off the hook for that. And we're moving rapidly towards the signing. But before we do that, I'm going to ask Johnny to take to the stage from UNFCCC, a long-standing supporter of the Edinburgh Declaration, helping make sure that it's aligned with all sorts of other initiatives and processes that are happening globally as well. Johnny, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us at this point.
Thank you so much, Harriet. How on earth am I supposed to follow all those amazing interventions from all these city leaders, regional leaders, subnational government leaders? I can't really, and I'm not going to even attempt to do that, but I may just capture some of the key messages that I think are emerging from today's session. I was actually just writing down all the different places that we've just heard from. So Quebec, Wales, Yucatan, Jalisco, Vitoria-Gasteiz, Hawaii, Niterói in Brazil. I've been to half of them, I think. I should declare an interest that I'm a Welshman that spent most of my life in Scotland, so I've got a little bit of a leaning towards the importance of subnational governments. For those of you who don't know UNEP WCMC, incidentally, we are the Specialist Biodiversity Centre of UNEP based in Cambridge in the UK. We have an 8-letter acronym, which I must always remember to spell out, which is the United Nations Environment Programme World Conservation Monitoring Centre. And we've been involved in the Edinburgh process from the very early days and supporting the process. So delighted to be here. My four take-home messages from today are, first of all, involvement at all levels of government is absolutely critical if we are to address the climate and biodiversity crises together, as we've heard. Without involvement in all those levels of government, we will fail. That might be quite a political statement coming from a non-political body, but I think that is an absolutely critical message from today. And indeed, we're actually seeing leadership from that subnational government, that regional, that city level. Some of the most ambitious leadership that we're seeing on both the climate and the biodiversity crises is already coming from that level. So it's not just a question of involvement, but integration of government decision making at those levels is actually critical to the delivery of, as we've heard, of the vision and the mission of the Rio Conventions, as Minister McCallan actually alluded to. The second thing, and this has been said by almost everybody, and it's amazing actually, because if we were sitting here 4 or 5 years ago, we wouldn't have heard this message that the biodiversity and climate crisis are absolutely inextricably linked. But it's actually more of an opportunity than that, because if they are implemented together cleverly, a huge amount of synergy can come from that, and we can deliver on a whole range of societal outcomes. I'll come on to MBS in a second and how MBS is actually the mechanism to do that. And if we don't embrace those synergies, of course, we risk exacerbating one crisis in solving another. So it's absolutely essential that we bring those together. MBS, and this is the third key message, I think, MBS, nature-based solutions. I've heard a lot about nature-based solutions. I'm going to give one example of what a nature-based solution is. Nature-based solutions are not just about delivering on climate. Natural climate solutions are one nature-based solution. Nature-based solutions can deliver on a range of different societal outcomes and indeed economic outcomes, and therefore on a range of different sustainable development goals. And this, I think, is critical to this question of the just transition and making sure that this is linked to the poverty agendas and indeed, a lot of the other agendas which are captured in the SDGs. Nature-based solutions are not just for climate. I think possibly the next message. But nature-based solutions are also, it's an amazingly powerful concept, but it's also an incredibly practical delivery mechanism for what we're trying to achieve in our pathway towards a more sustainable world. And what I mean by that, I wanted to take the example of peatlands, actually. There's an example of peatlands here. There's a nice picture of Edinburgh where nature-based solutions are obviously critical in cities. But peatlands cover about 3% of the global terrestrial land surface. I urge you to go and visit the Peatland Pavilion if you haven't been there already. And yet the degradation of some of that 3% of peatlands is causing hemorrhaging of carbon from terrestrial ecosystems. If we fix that, and we know how to fix it, we know that we can re-wet peatlands in a range of different contexts, from the tropical forests to the Arctic tundra. If we can restore those peatlands, that can contribute anything between 5 and 10% of the climate mitigation effort, whilst at the same time delivering climate change adaptation, whilst at the same time creating jobs in sometimes quite remote rural areas, whilst at the same time delivering biodiversity agenda. A great example of a nature-based solution. And there are many, many others. And I would point you to the IUCN standard on nature-based solutions, which is the go-to global standard on nature-based solutions, and very, very much makes this point that it's not just about climate delivery, it's about socioeconomic outcomes as well. So in conclusion, really, it's great to see recognition of the Edinburgh Declaration at the highest level in the UN. It's fantastic to see so many people here today signing up. I think there's going to be some new signatories today, which is absolutely amazing. And I'd just like to say a thank you to all the organisations that you see there listed, and particularly to the Scottish Government for their leadership that they've shown on this. It's great that what I consider my home city of Edinburgh has got its name on this process. I'm very proud of that. And to congratulate you all really on flying the flag for the importance of subnational, local, regional governments, and they're important in the Rio Conventions. So thank you very much, and back to you, Harriet.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Yeah, summarizing those key messages, those key take-homes for us from everything that we've heard today, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. So we've now finished the formal sort of presentation of why this agenda is so important. And thank you again to all of the people who were very accommodating and stayed where you were and gave us your contributions, and to all of the panel for sharing with us all of the extensive work that you're doing and your leadership. Thank you. And I'm going to hand over now to Ms. McKellen, who's going to lead us through some additional signatories to the Edinburgh Declaration. I think we might make it even, are we going to make it over 200? Or there's going to still, even after today, be an opportunity to join up afterwards. So let's at least try to get over 200 by the time that we're in Kunming, right? And thank you again, everybody. And please, if Ms. McKellen, if you would like us to take us through the next stage, thank you. You could use that mic, or I think that one will be cleaner because I've been hanging on to this one for the whole time.
Thank you very much, everyone. First of all, thank you to all of our distinguished contributors today, both on the panel and from the audience. It's such a pleasure to have heard from you all and all the wonderful things that you're doing. So thank you very much. I really can't tell you how grateful we are for the way that you have engaged so enthusiastically with the Edinburgh process, and long may it continue indeed onto Kunming. I think that we will reach over 200 because this week we were very pleased that just on Wednesday, the Lieutenant Governor of California was the 198th signatory. And if we have Secretary Wade Crowfoot, California's Secretary for Natural Resources, with us, I'd just like to invite you to say a few words about having done so. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. It's really encouraging and frankly refreshing to hear our mayors, our governors, our ministers, our secretaries talk about real solutions. I think we all agree that we're out of time to do anything but take urgent action, both on the climate crisis, but also on the biodiversity crisis. We as subnational leaders know that we need this convention to protect our nature and our forms of life, but we also know that this convention needs us. They need the actions on the ground, the perspective to actually succeed. In 2 months' time, we'll break ground in Los Angeles on what we think may be the world's largest wildlife overcrossing, not too far from the Hollywood sign that you may know. This is a nature bridge meant to connect two areas of habitat to avoid the extinction of a genetically distinct form of mountain lion that exists in greater Los Angeles, a city of 10 million people. It's not the federal government that's delivering that project. It's state government and local government working with philanthropy and nonprofit environmental organizations to get it done. I'm sure you have several examples in your own world, creative examples in your own cities and states, provinces of this work. And that's why it's so important. And we're so thankful that in maybe in a little bit of contrast to the Conference of Parties that we're at here, the subnationals are being recognized as central to the success of the Biodiversity Convention. But I'm here to say 200 is not enough. I thank you all for leading, and we're really proud to be the 198th signatory, but we know that we need, I'll say, thousands of subnational signatories to the Edinburgh Declaration. Thank you for the Scottish leadership. So we're just gratified to be here and to learn from each other and learn from you all and do what we need to get done.
Yep. And on that note, I won't add anything further except to invite anyone who's indicated that they wish to sign the declaration to join me in doing so. Thank you very much, everybody.